What's the scariest 100% true story you've heard of? Every orphan source report from the IEA is terrifying and well documented with pictures. One of the most horrifying is the Goiânia accident in 1987. For those who don't know, an orphan source accident is when radioactive material that had been lost, usually from an abandoned hospital, is discovered by people unaware of the danger who inadvertently expose themselves and others to lethal and/or permanently disfiguring doses of radiation. You read in horror as survivors describe people inviting their neighbors to see the oddity they found and share samples, children playing with the sparkly dust, all unaware that they have just doomed themselves. Acute radiation exposure is a truly nightmarish way to die. Your flesh rots away over months while skin grafts are ineffective. You deteriorate in pain in the hospital until you die of infection or necrosis. I live in Goiânia. Almost every day I go past the places where the accident happened, the house site, which is now all concreted over, the convention center that's in the lot over where the clinic with the capsule was left, many places. There is still some mention of it around, but it's not something most people here think about every day. It's a long past event with virtually zero remaining effects nowadays. Kinda like, oh yeah, there was that thing that happened here that time. It's terrifying to think that such a scary event happened of all places in the world. It happened in this fairly unknown city if you don't live around here, in the seemingly ordinary neighborhood near downtown. There was an incident in Trinidad where some maintenance divers were removing a plug from an oil pipeline and were instantly sucked into it. One was able to escape, but the other four were trapped for days in a small, oil-coated pipe for days with only a small air pocket to breathe in before they died. Thinking about it in detail and imagining what it must have been like for them makes me extremely uncomfortable. The really fricked up part is that the guy who got out promised his friends that he would get help. Once he reached people, they deemed it too dangerous for anyone to go back in there and help and would not let the guy go back in either. So they were promised help but left for dead. One of my friend's family growing up had a beach house and I'd get invited every now and then. They had dollar and the house was massive, pretty cool place too. They even had a full-time maid who had her own flat at the back. One day they go there for a long weekend, and when they opened the door, the place had been ransacked. It was all a mess, missing TVs, furniture, broken stuff. You get the picture. They went to check on the maid and her flat was empty, all her belongings were gone. They called the cops who came over and had a brief look, not interested from what they said, and left saying the maid probably had something to do with. And that's what everyone believed for a week. Until the dad returned the following weekend to try and change the locks and and he brought their dogs along with him. Yep, you know it. One of the dogs started digging and found the maid buried in the backyard under a tarp they had close to the pool. So the theory now is that whoever came in probably knew her and she recognized them and she had to go. In the 1990s, a nurse in New Jersey killed hundreds of hospital patients. Sometimes he would sneak into patients' rooms at night and inject them with fatal medication doses. Other times, he would put the medication into IV bags in the supply room, so they would kill whatever random patient they were given to later. He was accused several times. Some patients pointed him out before they died. Some staff thought he was creepy and dangerous and refused to work with him. He kept getting fired from hospitals. But the hospital managers knew that if he got arrested, they would be sued by the families of the patients he murdered. So they just fired him and didn't call the police. That happened at 12 different hospitals over the course of 16 years. Investigators believe he killed as many as 400 people. After he was arrested, he confessed to 40 murders. In 29 of them, he gave enough detail to be charged and plead guilty. He is linked to 300 more deaths than that, but details of those will probably never be known because so much information was lost over time or destroyed by the hospitals. The other night, my wife took our child out for several hours. In that time, I wrapped up work, then left to get dinner around 4:30 p.m. Got home around 6:30, played with our dog, and did a few chores. Then, when my wife got home about 7:30, we relaxed a bit and I headed for bed about 9 p.m., usually up early with our kid. Maybe 2 minutes after crawling into bed, I get a text from my wife with a picture of our dry erase menu board on our fridge. See, usually at the start of the week, my wife will fill out a rough menu for dinners that week. I remembered seeing it earlier in the day and it was filled out as expected. The picture she sent was of the menu all scrambled up, like the letters were all moved everywhere, with random words and squiggles throughout. Some of it was her writing, but others were incomplete words, or rewritten words in handwriting that wasn't hers or mine. This freaked us out, as our 1-year-old certainly didn't do it. The county sheriff showed up and swept the house and found nothing. Nothing was out of place or missing either. He was spooked by it a bit too. He said they never get a call out in the country where we are and recommended we change our locks. We hadn't, as the couple we bought our home from were elderly. So we did that night. When I was 17, I was hanging out with 2 friends and they wanted to go smoke weed in the woods. I didn't feel like it, so I drove them and waited in the car. After a while I was getting bored and decided to go meet them, but there were 4 paths going off in different directions, so I just took the biggest one. After walking for a few minutes in the pitch-black forest before flashlights on phones, I come across this dip in the trail, and on the other side is a bench lightly visible due to the moonlight. On the bench is sitting a man and another one is standing in front of him, but I can only make out silhouettes. Being sure these are my friends, I yell out to them before walking over. If you ever walk the woods at night, it's just an uneasy feeling all around, so I was cautious to begin with. Well, it turns out, just after yelling out to my friends, both silhouettes turn around towards me. Not a word, not a sound. The guy sitting down starts sprinting full fricking speed towards me in complete silence. I got the absolute frick out of there, sprinting also the other way and tripping over crap because I couldn't see anything. I finally get out and lock myself in my car, but I was really worried for my friends. Maybe a minute later I see them both coming out of a completely different path. They also confirmed they never saw me or anyone else. My heart still sinks just thinking about that dude sprinting in silence. What the frick was that crap? I was around 10 years old. I was at school, but my mom told me she was thinking of taking me to the doctor's in the afternoon, recurring eye issue. Lunchtime, and I'm in the dining hall when the office woman told me there was a taxi outside for me and I needed to go. I assumed my mom booked it for me as she can't drive. I cleared up my stuff and got my bag. Just about to leave when I remembered my jacket in my classroom. I rushed to get and head out for the taxi. Office woman tells me I'm too late and the taxi had gone without me. I just went back to class, but panicking my mom would be angry at me. School finishes and my mom is waiting for me at the gates. I burst into tears, apologizing for missing the taxi and thinking I was in big trouble. She never ordered a taxi and had no clue what I was talking about. She ended up not making the doctor appointment. No one ever found out who ordered the taxi or who driver was. My mom doesn't like to think what would have happened if I hadn't forgotten my jacket and got in that taxi. My aunt fell asleep on her couch one night and my uncle was asleep upstairs. She woke up around 12 a.m. to a random man staring at her while she slept. He said the guy upstairs was sound asleep, meaning he came in, saw my aunt on the couch, looked around, saw my uncle asleep upstairs, and then sat there and watched. She told him to leave, and somehow by the will of God he left. He slid in through the back door. We live in a relatively safe area.